welcome to country is a modern construct. Absolutely is. It's been about guilt politics shoved down our throat, being told we're a racist country, and everyone's jack of it, including Aboriginal Australians who are saying no. But I think Aussies are saying, you know what? I was born here.
Yeah.
I belong here like everybody else, and I don't need to be welcomed to my own country.
Welcome to this special episode of Free Voices with Senator Jacinta Price. Senator Price, as you know, is a leader in many of the major debates facing our nation's future, most prominently regarding the Voice to Parliament debate. Senator Price is the Senator for Northern Territory since 2022 and was previously Deputy Mayor of Alice Springs. We have a very wide-ranging discussion today, ranging from the fallout from the Voice to Parliament and why political leaders aren't respecting that vote, through to discussing small businesses and the impact that the government's budget is having on the future of our economy. So, Senator Price, it's great to have a chat with you today. Wanted to start by chatting about something you've talked about for a really long time, which is the disconnect sometimes between the way in which the media and some of the inner city types portray Indigenous culture on the ground and the reality of that, where you have the lived experience. And of course, last month we had the tragic alleged murder of a 5-year-old, and that is something that I think has really brought to the fore the real challenges that are on the ground. And you've written and talked about this a lot, including in Parliament with a very moving speech that you gave. What's sort of some of the reality that you've observed and how those in the inner cities might not always understand what's really going on?
Unless you've lived it, you can't possibly know. And there is a lot of romanticism around Indigenous culture, which has come out of our eastern states because of the removal of culture around on this side of the country. But for those that live it, and predominantly my family, there is a reality that not all aspects of traditional culture are beneficial, and culture can be a trap as well. I mean, I talk about it all the time. There are parts of my culture that I know that are positive, that we should take forward, but there's a hell of a lot that we should leave behind. And part of that is the fact that girls and women are not considered equal to men. You're only considered, I suppose, equal once you have become an older woman, and but ultimately I've grown up all my life understanding that you don't step on the toes of men. You respect secret men's business. If you were to ever come across men's business, you could be punished, and the punishment, depending on what the crime is, how much you've infiltrated men's business, is rape and then a beating, and you could be killed ultimately. I mean, this is stuff you learn from when you're a kid, understanding your whole life, and also that understanding that you could be part of an arranged marriage, and then when you get to a certain age, you might be married off to somebody that is much older than you. I mean, the feminists don't like this because for Western feminists, they live within their box. They just stand up for equal wages and burning bras. But when it comes to different, I think even ethnic groups, I suppose, don't talk about your culture because that's somebody else's. We don't talk about other people. Other people are free to live their cultures, even though it denies the rights of women and girls. But Western culture, we can do what we want, and which is the same sort of criticisms that I've copped. Been called a sellout and all this kind of stuff, and a race trader and all that, because I want to call out the elements of my traditional culture that aren't beneficial. I mean, they lend themselves to the abuse of children, in that if it's all right, and there have been well-known, respected elders and leaders, and known nationally revered individuals who have had many wives, because polygamy is a common practice, and taken on a wife. And, there's one particular leader, I won't mention the name, but those in the territory will know who I'm talking about, who had a 13-year-old wife. And if you can't talk about these things, how are we going to tackle the issues of domestic and family violence, how are we going to tackle the issues of sexual abuse, which is prevalent in Indigenous communities? The activist class don't want to talk about this. It's like recently talking to land councils in Senate estimates and putting to them, they're suggesting we need a royal commission into racism. Well, I'm sorry, but racism isn't killing or sexually abusing our children and our women.
Yeah.
But violence is, abuse is, sexual abuse is. So I think it's far more important, that we look at examining the sexual abuse of Indigenous children, which, Indigenous children experience at far greater rates than non-Indigenous children in this country. And when you put them on the spot like that, and what I did say to them is, because they said, the data, and we need the data. Well, and the evidence, there's a ton of data and there's a ton of evidence. I said to them, if you can be convinced with the evidence and the data, then would you get behind it? At that point, they can't disagree. They say, yes, we would. We'd have to. Mm. But, having these conversations about culture and having grown up in it on the ground and not looking at it through the views of inner city, Melbourne, the rose-coloured glasses, I can tell you that for the sake of saving lives and allowing for the voices of the most vulnerable to be heard, we need to have these really tough conversations. If we want to improve our country, if we want to start solving some of our tough issues, we need to put it all on the table and have those conversations. And I know there are those who do want to have those conversations. And once we're unafraid to do so, we can only move forward from that, I truly believe.
Mm. What's behind the resistance when you raise these points? Is it that you're putting to them the reality and it's butting up against their, perception or ideology? It sort of seems strange that they would resist something that is, to you and your experience, very obvious and also a serious problem. Why do you think they're so resistant to it?
Well, the argument is, and it's largely driven by the activist class, the argument is that, well, you'll encourage racism. If you highlight where we actually don't get things right, you encourage racism. And that's what they're more afraid of. They're more afraid of more racism than they are of actually protecting the lives of women and children. And if we'd taken this approach, it was my niece whose life was taken away, and allegedly murdered and allegedly sexually abused. And she was 5 years old. We could have saved her life if we were prepared to have these conversations, if we stood up as adults and said, fundamentally, it's about taking care of our vulnerable. It's incumbent upon us to do so. I will always stand up and argue against those voices that are more concerned about appearing, like fueling the fire of the racist. I don't give a damn about the racist. The racist, racism exists everywhere. It's a mental illness. Let's treat them like that. But fundamentally, let's protect our babies, for crying out loud. To me, it's like you do that you do everything and anything in order to do that. Mm.
Well, one of the best speeches, not only that I've ever heard you give, but one of the best speeches I've ever heard given by an Australian politician was the one you gave at the National Press Club during the Voice to Parliament debate, where they shunted you off into the side room claiming that, the main room's going under some kind of fix or whatever. I'm sure it just happened to coincide with your appearance. Mm-hmm. But you made the observation that British settlement of Australia has been a good thing, and not necessarily an unalloyed good thing, but has overall been beneficial, including to Indigenous Australians. And I think when most Australians heard that, they thought, firstly, yeah, I agree with you. And secondly, thank gosh, someone is finally actually saying this, because I think it's something that's fairly obvious to most ordinary Australians, but something that the elites would, you're not allowed to say those kind of things, right? And that was sort of the response and reaction that you got, which is, you can't say that. How could you possibly say that? Were you sort of surprised by that reaction that sort of the usual suspects had towards what you were saying?
No, because the usual suspects want me to wallow in victimhood, and I wasn't going to empower them through that, handing over my agency to them and saying, yes, I'm a poor Aboriginal victim, and you, white journalist, somehow you are going to empower me through viewing me as a victim. No, like, come on, we're human beings, and you know, I challenge any Aboriginal person today, especially a successful urban Aboriginal person who has a roof over their head, who's gaining a six-figure salary and driving a modern vehicle and living their lives amongst other Australians. I challenge them, would you give up all of that in order to go and live the traditional way of life, where life is bloody hard? And I can tell you from, my grandparents who saw their first white fellas when they were in their early adolescence, life was tough. Living in a desert environment and fending for oneself, like I said, if you're a young girl, well, you are going to be married off, probably in an arranged marriage, and be a third or fourth wife.
Yeah.
Would you give up your life today for that? I don't think so. And we have got much to celebrate in this country, and if we can't appreciate what we have now in our country, then something's fundamentally wrong with that. And the likelihood of our young people wanting to defend this nation, to recognise all the wonderful things that we've brought together, we've created together, from our First Peoples to, our settlers to our migrant community. We have built and established a remarkable country if you compare us to countries around the globe. And that's something worth celebrating, and would not have come about, if we hadn't experienced the British coming and settling in our country.
Yeah. In terms of the Voice to Parliament debate and the sort of the unanimous, the massive no vote that was to the Voice, it sort of appears to be the case that a lot of political leaders haven't really got the message. Like, yes, it's true that the federal Labor government has sort of dropped the rhetoric around voice, treaty and truth, but we see this being pursued at the states. Here in Victoria, they're going full on ahead with the treaty. South Australia just dropped their budget the other day saying that they're going to go ahead with voice, treaty and truth. There's a treaty process underway in New South Wales. Isn't this one of the problems with why, in my view, people are losing trust and confidence in democracy and politicians precisely for this reason, right? We have a no vote and then they go, well, too bad. Like, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. I mean, this is the thing fueling discontent. Do you reckon?
Look, absolutely. And, the Victorian government and the South Australian government are completely disregarded and disrespected Victorians and South Australians who ultimately voted no to the Voice to Parliament. And they're just dividing us along the lines of race. I mean, South Australia, it was a pathetic turnout for, the Voice vote, obviously. The fact that some representatives of their voice were unchallenged, or sometimes didn't even know that they'd been, nominated as to be a candidate in that. But what's it doing? What's it producing? How is it improving anybody's life? In Victoria, I mean, I think there's more to come in that if you get another Labor government after this November, I'm sure there'll be more land stripped away from everyday Victorians and more division to become, and more treating those of Indigenous heritage differently to those who don't have Indigenous heritage in Victoria. And that's fundamentally racist. I mean, that's apartheid, effectively. The left has ensured apartheid in our country, in South Australia and in Victoria. It's not what we're about, and it's certainly not what the Australian people said during the referendum.
Yeah. Well, just a couple more on that, then we'll go to sort of the economics and the small business as well. But the other thing that really annoys the hell out of people is the ubiquitous use of welcome to country and acknowledgement of country. I mean, I think it has tapered off a bit over the last couple of years, and the corporates aren't doing it as much as they used to, because I think they're starting to get the message finally. But at a lot of footy games, they still do it every time, well, not quite every time, but most of the time when you're playing land somewhere, they do it. There's dual naming that goes on in a lot of places as well. And it's just sort of like, I think it's gotten to the point where the typical person used to think that it was well-intentioned. So they would go along with it saying, okay, well, if this really is something that might make people feel better, we'll do it. But I think what people are starting to understand is it's not really about the intentions. There's an activist cohort that's driving it because they really do believe Australia is a bad country and they're not proud of our country and they want to deconstruct it. So sadly, a lot of the Indigenous issues have been used as a cudgel for them to achieve their ideological aims, is how I interpret it, and I think how a lot of people now see the use of Welcome to Country and also the three flags. I'm just interested in your perspective on those matters.
Yeah, look, I think as a country we've lost a really valuable opportunity in that I know that for many Australians have been sort of starving to want to understand more about Aboriginal Australia and feel more connected to it. And what's happened is because of that void, what's filled the void is the activist class and guilt politics, as opposed to a creation of true reconciliation, a sharing of knowledge with one another to create better understanding and more cohesion amongst us, I truly believe. And Welcome to Country has become that. Now, and I genuinely think there were those who wanted to utilise, Welcome to Country as a way of sharing of knowledge and understanding. But there has been far too much of the activist class who have this, who have within them to hijack everything. And that's what they've done with Welcome to Country. I mean, I'll always say Welcome to Country is a modern construct. Absolutely is. And I suppose it could have been a good opportunity, but hijacked by the activist class who, one, it became part of the Aboriginal industry, which meant big money. And, even the ABC through their black comedy program acknowledged that all of a sudden you've got Aboriginal groups vying for the opportunity to deliver Welcome to Country because it's a money spinner. That there's that element to it as well, which is in that comedy there's truth behind that. But now it's been about guilt politics shoved down our throat, being told we're a racist country, and everyone's jack of it, including Aboriginal Australians who are saying no. I know so many Aboriginal people who go, roll their eyes every time they hear an acknowledgement or Welcome to Country, go, here we go again. Do we really have to sit through this, And rightly so. There's probably moments for it, like if there's foreign dignitaries to do that, to put on display everything that makes us Australian, including the Indigenous element. But I think Aussies are saying, you know what? I was born here.
Yeah.
I belong here like everybody else. I don't want to be treated like some kind of imposter or like I don't belong here. And I don't need to be welcomed to my own country that I feel that I am connected to, whether I'm Indigenous or not. Well, technically you are, I suppose, if you're born here anyway, right? But, I think, and Aussies genuinely want to see our marginalised overcome adversity and have opportunity, but they've also come to realise that it's not going to happen through things like Welcome to Country or acknowledgement to country. They've just become hollow virtues that are sort of throwaways now.
Yeah. One of the things I've sort of wondered is what must it feel like if you're a new migrant coming to Australia? Like if you had migrated here in the middle of the Voice to Parliament debate, you must be thinking, what country am I actually living in? Like this is a country that seems to want to give different rights to different people based on race, which is a lot of people that have come here have left countries precisely because they have a racially tiered society. Then they come here and they're doing dual naming, they've got the different flags. And when we talk about the challenges of integration of new migrants into Australia, I think a part of that is because certainly in the elite circles, there is not a clear definition of what it is that we're expecting them to assimilate into. So if we're not presenting a coherent vision of our country to them, then what chance do they have? If you've got the Prime Minister who, as soon as he was elected in 2022, first he gave an acknowledgement of country,
yes,
and then he said we're doing Uluru Statement from the Heart in full, something that nobody had really heard of up until that moment. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, I thought what's this thing about racial division in Australia? Do you reckon it's a bit of an issue when it comes to the new migrants coming in and trying to understand what Australia is?
And then the Prime Minister stuck up 3 flags,
Yeah.
which confused, new migrants even more so. I mean, on the global stage, we look confused because of those 3 flags. Everyone knows one nation, one flag, and that's how it should be ultimately. My migrant husband came here as you said as a Scotsman, and then when he got here, he realised, I've been treated like I'm actually just a white person now. It's like there's like this division taking place because of the government that's in place, because of left-wing politics that has us all in its grasp and treating us on the basis of race instead of just as Australians, one group of people ultimately. And so, yeah, I think migrants are certainly confused, but we have to do it properly. And I think, which I suppose, hats off to the IPA in terms of the education program, which is teaching our children our history in the round as it should be. And that's what needs to continue to happen going forward so that our young people can develop a sense of identity and pride in that identity and who we are. And then that can be what resonates with the migrant community as well. And mind you, there are those obviously who've been here for a while who get it, who get what it means to be an Aussie in this country, and have adopted our values and love this country for the opportunities that it has provided them.
Yeah.
And but we've got to get our act together, most definitely.
Yeah. Do you reckon it's time to stop the 3 flag thing, or stop it on the, at least when it comes to official parliamentary business and so forth? Is it time to just stop that and just have the 1 flag?
Absolutely it is. We have to. Again, we are one country under one flag, one law, and treat everyone as such. And I suppose politically, I think we need to start treating people on the basis of need instead of race as well.
Yep. Talking about your immediate responsibilities as a shadow minister, obviously the budget that came down from Labor was not a good budget when it comes to our economy, and particularly for small businesses, especially as it relates to the capital gains tax discount changes. What is it that you've heard from small business about how this might actually affect the practicalities of running a business? Because I don't know if there's many people on the Labor front bench that have much of an idea of what it's like to invest, to pay wages, to make payroll, and to deal with regulation and red tape. What's your thoughts on how this might impact the small businesses in Australia?
Well, first and foremost, our Prime Minister is a liar. Let's get that out front straight away, because it's the truth, and he's done everything he can to stop us from speaking the truth in Parliament. And obviously, it's now it's against the rules to call him a liar on the floor of the House.
Maybe need truth telling in to the budget.
Exactly.
That's the kind of truth telling we can get behind.
Precisely. But no, this Prime Minister said over 50 times that he would not make any changes to CGT and to capital gains tax and to negative gearing. That's right. And he's gone back on his word over and over again. And look, I've been travelling around the country and speaking to small business owners everywhere, and they are absolutely beside themselves. I mean, just yesterday I was in a nursery in the seat of Casey with my colleague Aaron Violi, and they've been there for 107 years, and they've been doing it tough. So prior to the fuel crisis and the Middle East crisis that we've experienced, they were already doing it tough. And I know this government has been trying to blame a lot of what's been going on and the cost of everything going up on the fuel crisis, but businesses were doing it tough prior to that. For this particular nursery, I mean, they had to contend with the fact that, energy has gone up 37 to 40%, and that pushes up the cost of doing business across the board, the cost of everything. Insurance has gone up 101%, and they have to deal with paying for quarantining, plants that they bring over. I've learned a lot about this business. The cost of that quarantining for them has gone up 600%. That's the regulatory impact that hits this particular business, but the regulatory compliance burden is costing businesses $160 billion a year. If you can imagine the impact that is having on productivity in our country, this government is absolutely killing aspiration. I mean, small businesses, the butchers and the nurseries and all the little companies, all the little places, the cafes that we see, where we take for granted, we wander into every day. But they are those who give our kids their first opportunities. I know my boys have all worked in a sports store in Alice Springs, and one in a caravan park, and now this government is ensuring that they're removing that aspiration by making it harder. The compliance burden now that these businesses face due to the CGT changes is going to be huge. We've got payroll super, which now comes in. There'll be businesses that won't be prepared for that. So there'll be businesses that'll be caught out. Sitting at Senate estimates last week and asking ASIC what they think is big drivers of pushing down, businesses and investment and leading to insolvencies. And they put the blame back onto small businesses. They said it was cash flow. They said it was business management issues. Whereas the RBA will tell you it's because of government policy. The Small Business Ombudsman will tell you that more small businesses are currently reaching out to services that they provide that are dealing with mental health, issues that they are being confronted with because they're being absolutely killed by this government. And so, we want to be able to do whatever we can to support small business. We will axe Labor's toxic taxes if we win government. We want to increase the instant asset write-off to $50,000 and make that permanent. But there's workforce shortage in this country. And in terms of skills and training, you've got a government who's removed $266 million from, their apprenticeship incentive scheme. And at one stage, Minister Giles was suggesting that I lied again. They're pretty good at lying, this government, saying that I had said we'd scrap that scheme when I had not said that at all. But they've gone and removed incentives for apprentices at a time when we need it the absolute most in this country. But there is so much that small businesses have to think of, and so much they have to do to keep their heads afloat above water. And it is heartbreaking to hear these people tell me their stories, and a lot of the time breaking down in tears when I hear them talk about the challenges that they're faced with and the way that this government doesn't give a damn about them, just sees them as a golden goose that can continue to make money, and so they can continue to tax the hell out of them. It's wrong.
Yeah. Why do you reckon the government's doing it? Is it because they just have no idea of the impact? Is it because, traditionally small business owners have probably been more to the right politically in how they would vote, so they sort of see it as, well, if small businesses get crushed and we have more people going into the public sector and the non-market sector, then they're future Labor voters. I mean, I know that sounds cynical, but when you look at the impact of the budget, you've got to sort of think about, also because it's quite unpopular, the budget. I'm sort of struggling to understand why would they, or is it just, as the Treasury Secretary said, basically a cash grab because they're running out of money? Why do you reckon the government's going down this path?
A number of those issues. You're right. The more people they can push into the public sector, the more dependency, the more dependent the Australian people become on the government. But of course, once they run out of money, well, they come after yours, and they see it as a quick grab for money coming after small businesses. But you also can't unionise small business either. So fundamentally, this is the only way they can have any kind of level of control, over small business. But they're not taking into account the dire outcomes of this. I mean, I'm also hearing from small businesses the fact that they're saying, well, we are now looking at how we can take our business over to Singapore or over to New Zealand, or to the United States. Because why would they want to continue to invest here in a country that does not care when they are reducing their margins but increasing their tax? Yeah. I mean, it's just, that they are suffering, and this government doesn't care for those reasons, but also has very little experience themselves in what it is to run a small business, to understand what it's like to put, all your life savings into a project, have sleepless nights, work 7 days a week, hardly see your family unless they're by your side as part of the business, and pay yourself very little to get ahead, to then have that all stripped away from you when you go to sell your business one day and you have to hand over 47% of your profit to the government. I mean, why would you want to build toward that if it's just going to be stripped away from you in the end? Yeah.
Something that I found fascinating in this debate has been the government seemed to have targeted this towards trying to get young people to be more favourable to Labor, in saying, well, the boomers have had they've had a great run. It's unfair that they've used all of this. We're going to change the system so that you can get into a house. But when you look at the government's own budget figures, those figures show that even if you believe those figures, right, taken at face value, that only 7,500 extra Australians will be in their own home. Right, as a result of the changes they're making.
That's right.
Per year, right? Yeah. So you look at it and you go, well, on the one hand, you got Jim Chalmers saying that this is a big, ambitious reform budget, right? It's going to make the world a better place. On the other hand, the government's own figures say that this isn't actually going to make any real difference to the day-to-day lives of Australians, including young Australians.
Precisely.
And I think the other thing they've underestimated is young Australians are very entrepreneurial. Like if you ask a typical 20 or 24-year-old, on average, they want to be able to start their own business. They like the idea of working for themselves.
Yes.
More and more of them do not want to work in a boring 9-to-5 corporate job. That is not something that's attractive to them. You have a lot of employers who complain about this, but I sort of understand where it's coming from, which is they've seen their parents or their grandparents grind it out in a corporate job, and they're like, I don't want to do that. I want to work for myself, and if I work hard and get ahead, I should get the opportunity to keep more of my money and do with it as I want. And I don't think the left understand this mentality whatsoever.
That's right. No, precisely. There are a hell of a lot of entrepreneurial young people, and I think we saw them come out straight after the budget, all over TikTok and Instagram, and those small, those startups who are saying, let me introduce you to my 47%, a silent business partner here. I mean, they're the ones that are come out and realising, hang on a second, no, this government isn't there to support us. They're taking away our future. I mean, in a budget that suggests that every year, there's going to be a 35,000 shortfall in terms of housing. Young people aren't going to be able to own their own homes either, but they're also going after the assets that young people invest in for their future. Their shares, their Bitcoin, their crypto. They're going after that as well. So nobody's safe from this government, but particularly young people. And fundamentally for us, we want to make sure that young people can have that Australian dream where they can own their own home. We're seeing a situation where young people are holding off from having children because it's not a place that they're keeping up in terms of the cost of living. There's still young people living with mum and dad because they can't afford to have their own place as well. But I suppose it's a reason why we want to slash the National Construction Code as well, from the almost 2,500 pages it currently sits at to 200, so that those who are building homes in the construction industry, it'll cost them $70,000 less to build a home. We're cutting $70,000 off a build by cutting the National Construction Code. That's what we want to be able to do to enable Australians, but our young people, to own their own homes one day.
I just want to return to something you mentioned, which I thought was very interesting in the skills context, which is obviously one of the number one things you'd probably hear from a small business is they're struggling to find the right people for the job. And what I find difficult to understand is that's taking place at the same time as we've got the biggest number of migrants coming into our country and our nation's history. And the government tells us it's a skilled migration program. So it's really interesting if you compare Australia to New Zealand with the skills situation. So our skill shortages, if you look at the ABS, they have the job vacancy data, is still about 1/3 higher than what it was before COVID. So everyone accepts the COVID disruption will take time. It's been a number of years. It's still 1/3 higher than pre-COVID. New Zealand is basically back to where it was pre-COVID in terms of its job vacancies. So something isn't working. We've got record number of migrants, but we've still got massive job vacancies. So they're not matching up properly.
That's right.
What do you, obviously the migration system isn't working, but also there must be an issue in finding or training. Our education system doesn't seem to be actually getting people into the workforce with relevant skills. What do you reckon some of the issues are there?
Well, for starters, they've destroyed the skilled migration program in this country, and it needs to be fixed. And that's something that we'll be looking at. While we want to ensure that we're matching, we're capping migration to housing in this country, so that our infrastructure can keep up. We will also, and later down the line, we want to make sure that we are bringing in the right skilled migrants who are contributing to those skills gaps. But we absolutely need to do more in terms of the skills and training and the apprenticeship space, and those policies will come also. But we need to create a culture where we are valuing, vocational education as well. And it's just as important, I think, for a young person to be able to gain an apprenticeship as it is for our young people to attend university. In fact, it's probably more important now that young people get into trades because we need it. I mean, construction in our country is languishing. I mean, let's face it. It's the number one sector that is 25% insolvencies in this country, and that is huge. And that is why this government is failing in terms of housing. This is why businesses are suffering, but also not being able to find and gain those apprentices that they need. So absolutely, more needs to be done in that space, and coupled with migration. I know, particularly in places like the Northern Territory, where we welcome more migrants, but also we need the right skilled migrants within the Northern Territory. So it's about getting all those balances right.
Just on education, it seems to me that the universities, certainly over the last 10 years, and particularly since COVID, have really lost their way quite badly. I mean, a lot of them, you look at University of Sydney, over half of their student cohort are from overseas students. And that's definitely come at the expense of local students and the actual teaching of the content that goes on there. And to me, it feels like we've sort of passed peak university. I sort of feel, I think a lot of younger people coming through, I mean, it was sort of drilled into me when I went to school that you've got to go to uni. And I benefited, like I was a beneficiary. I went to a great uni, a great school, and I'm really appreciative of the skills that I got from that. But what makes me sad is I see that that's no longer the case. That the experience that even I had, and I only finished my undergraduate, 15 or something years ago, even in that space of time, it's deteriorated where students barely even go on campus. They don't get the social interaction. And I sort of feel that the time of, the days of everyone needs to go to uni are sort of coming to an end. And I just think the way things are changing in our economy and our society, that sort of the antiquated educational approach is not really fit for purpose anymore. And I know that's a bit broader than just the skills component, but
Yeah.
it just feels to me that it's a sector that's really ripe for some significant change.
Well, I think so, absolutely. And I think it comes back to fundamentally the need to educate our kids instead of indoctrinate our kids, our young people. And universities have become a place of indoctrination as opposed to education. So it comes back to the curriculum. And I know that, in the lead up to the last election, that Sarah Henderson, as the former shadow education representative, did a raft of great work in that space about resetting the curriculum to get it back to the fundamental basics. And I think that's something we seriously need to consider going forward. And not just that, but dealing with weeding out things like anti-Semitism in our universities. I mean, they've just become hotbeds of activism instead of education once more. And we need to. There is a hell of a lot of work that needs to be done to sort out our institutions in that vein. I truly believe before they can become once more places that are about providing opportunity and challenging young people toward free thinking and challenging ideas. It's about getting back to basics, I think.
Yep. Well, on that note, I think we'll leave it there. Senator Price, so thank you very much for your time and for your leadership. I know a lot of Australians are really grateful for the role that you've played. I mean, we talk a lot about the Voice to Parliament debate, but the thing that I always reflect on is that was not so much a victory of any political party or politician, but it really was a victory of the people. It really was actually a grassroots sort of awakening of what it means to be an Australian. And it's thanks to the leadership of yourself and others such as Warren Mundine that argument was able to be put to the public. So I know a lot of Australians really appreciate the work that you've done, and we do. So thanks for your time and thanks for all the leadership you've provided.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.